Hi, this is Rick Ferguson at musicaloffering.org and rickfergusonmusic.com. I'm here today with Musical Offering faculty member and composer Jack Langdon. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you.
We're going to be learning about the finished product of Jack's collaborative opera project that you just finished this month, right? So here we are at the end of April 2019. And Jack, it seems that you managed to find a way to survive this project.
I did indeed.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So congratulations, kudos for actually being here and being able to string together coherent sentences after going through this project. So remind us first, what was the project? Because, this was not your normal, you just write an opera and then you stage the opera. This was very different than that. Right. So, remind us of what this project entailed.
Yeah. So the opera was, the title was Here for a Poetics of Art Labor. And I came up with a proposal in October with a few of my, one musician friend, two dancer friends. So already we're getting into some strange things in terms of the opera format. It was only 4 people, so very limited in scope, but a heavy emphasis on video, on movement.
So real multidisciplinary
exactly.
stuff. Okay.
It all still sort of served this, like, we are dramatizing, we're taking a story maybe in an abstract sense, but making it something that over time is turned into this very immersive, this very experimental, in our case, opportunity to engage with movement, so sight as well as sound, as normal operas do as well. I wouldn't say that our opera was normal, though.
So in what ways were you staging and creating an abnormal opera?
So the premise for the opera, it wasn't based on a libretto, like your normal Verdi operas or your Wagner.
Right.
We basically said, as a concept for this whole work, that each of us 4 performers have our own stories, have our own interactions in the world as artists, and that's actually interesting. And it's also something that oftentimes gets hidden behind a lot of the process, and it becomes sort of secondary from maybe like a certain aesthetic, certain formal interest, or in the case of opera, obviously it's a very dedicated narrative that is oftentimes written to tell a story.
Right.
We wanted to tell our stories, and through that kind of talk about maybe a broader truth about what it means to be an artist in the 21st century, which oftentimes is one of struggle and oftentimes one of misplaced value, and this constant need to always sell your work as being somewhat of a significant creative limitation, actually.
So it sounds to me like you were really personalizing this process.
Yes.
That this became a very personal venture, right?
Absolutely. And I think it was partially so that we can come up with really honest, maybe sometimes difficult to talk about stories, mostly in the interest of being very transparent. Because obviously as artists, oftentimes there's a lot of specialized training that goes into the working of our craft. And that's oftentimes hidden. It's something that remains sort of esoteric and inaccessible.
Thereby maybe creating a disconnect, right, between audience and creators. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in other words, I'm hearing there was really no middleman here, right?
More or less. I mean, in doing this, we're using our stories. We're using the situation of having this 10-day long residency where we were rehearsing, where we were discussing what this piece wanted to be out of our collective efforts. But that also required us to reflect on the fact that, I've been playing piano for the greater portion of my life, and that 2 of the members have been dancing since they were very, very young, and the other one is a professional flutist, and they all have this very long specialized training, but nonetheless, even before that, and in sort of the periphery as professionals, you've got a real human being behind that.
Yeah.
And it's not just somebody that's played, every scale hundreds and hundreds of times. It's also the story of their life, and it's also their aspirations and struggles.
Yeah, yeah. So talk a little bit about the actual performance. What was that like? How did it come off?
Yeah. Well, we decided on making it into a work of about 6 acts. And the entire performance was an hour and a half long, thereabout. And it started off as very meditative. It was very much quiet, trying to bring the audience into sort of a higher realm of being able to perceive all the details and being very gentle about that. Then we had a very sudden cut to basically a 20-minute long section that was nothing but documentary film. And in this, it was a series of interviews that we conducted where I was asking questions to the different performers and they were asking me questions and whatnot. All sort of on the theme of why did you want to become an artist once upon a time in the first place? What did you imagine yourself as doing when you were, young and naive? And how has your reality changed since then, given growing up always is a process of making compromises and reevaluating your hopes and dreams and whatnot. And then going on beyond that, asking what is an ideal world that you could imagine that would allow you to, as freely as you can conceive of, work on your art. And that was an extremely revealing, but even in terms of a performance, the musicians were again playing a very subsidiary role to the film in this instance, and it was, I'm sure, very, very unexpected. It's not a medium that is super conducive to people sitting there for 20 minutes and just watching what is essentially a series of interviews. After that, in the third section, all of the lights in the house completely turned off. It was pitch black. We had 8 minutes of very, very fast, very intense music that started from unison rhythms to extremely complex rhythms, ending again in unison. The fourth part following that, we turned on not only the stage lights, but the house lights, which were these horrific, white fluorescent bulbs. So it was like
industrial lighting.
You were like in a dentist's office, practically. So that was very jarring too. But that fourth
Little Shop of Horrors, everybody. Yes,
yeah,
yes,
right. At that point, we did a bit of an interesting thing where that section was the title of the opera, actually. All the other sections had titles as well, but they were a little bit more evocative. This one was basically, we were setting the stage up from a little bit more of a unconventional format for the beginning, mostly to really facilitate good communication during the improvisation. But this next one, we had 5 minutes, all the lights were on, and we were trying to dramatize setting up a stage. Something, again, that is nonetheless very laborious and something that takes a lot of specialized skill, actually, if you're doing it at a high level. But it's on the periphery. It's one of the practicalities of performing music that often goes unappreciated.
And when it happens well, right, and sort of seamlessly in the context of a normal opera or whatever, you're really not supposed to notice it very much, right?
Exactly.
And so you're sort of like doing the anti that.
Yeah, it's very much working against immersion. We hear a lot in the art world and a lot in the music world that a good piece of art immerses you in it. I'm very much of the school of like Bertolt Brecht, who was very much more concerned about audience members who are very aware of the context of performing. And in this case, even when I was in college, I did a little bit of stagehand work, and I work over at another venue in Logan Square every once in a while and do a little bit of audio tech stuff. And it can oftentimes be a very thankless and
but so incredibly important. I mean, it's vital.
Exactly.
Right?
If you didn't have people, even just to set up the simple things like having stands on stage, it would be a very unsuccessful.
I mean, things fall apart if that doesn't happen, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we thought it would be interesting to really kind of show, as a part of the opera, that behind the sort of veil of performing things, there are all these other, labor-intensive processes that are very, very important and actually require just as much attention as performing an instrument in some cases. Right,
yes.
So following that was a half-hour long, and this was probably my favorite part. It was a guided improvisation where our ensemble made a score through kind of a game that I devised where we all had to write down a variety of different words, and then it was our job to draw lines basically between these words so that we had effectively built a map.
Yes.
And we followed this map in 3 different stages, 3 different pages of a score. The first one starting with mostly sound-centric actions and descriptors, a transition, which is has a little bit of terminology of both sound performance and movement performance. And then the final one was basically nothing but us moving around the space. So fortunately, we had 2 very, very talented dancers, Gabriel Coleman and Cosmo Pori, who I had worked with and known for quite a while. And they had myself and flutist Joshua Weinberg really think about movement and all of these things that we had not been particularly trained in, let's say.
It sounds to me as if that the kinetic element sort of across the board in a way was really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I didn't thematize it too much, but sort of abstractly speaking, I mean, there's so much work that goes into being somebody that is involved in, I guess not just the arts, but somebody who's does work in general.
Yes.
And thinking about like what it means to be specialized in something, and thinking about what it means to dedicate time to do something, and really trying to seek value in a very overt way that fortunately me as a composer, I can kind of control that and place attention on things that sometimes just kind of go by the wayside.
Like shine a light where you want that light to be shined, right?
Exactly,
Yeah. That's brilliant.
And it was very fun to be able to take, performing an instrument in a way, it is very choreographic.
Right.
If you even think of like piano players playing massive leaps on the piano.
Yes.
It's a very embodied, very like physically intensive virtuosic action. And it has a certain beauty, even though, like, say you take away the piano and you are moving from the lowest register to the highest register.
Yes.
With your whole body and with your whole back, it is a dance.
It is.
It turns into a dance.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of logical connections between performing music, doing the work that goes into setting up the stage and making an opera happen, and doing this very abstract movement. I think there was a really strong thread between all of that.
Yes. What I'm interested, what kind of response or feedback did you get from the audience?
We actually had and this is probably my favorite part of the entire residency, we had our audience afterwards. We went and talked with everybody, and everybody decided that it would be a good idea to get together and have just a period of time to talk about stuff. We had a few people in particular that had a very strong emotional connection to sort of this whole topic that we were discussing. One of them she's a curator and had moved to New York recently, taken a very high-profile job, and had been working at the Guggenheim and doing all of these like very established art world things. Became completely disenchanted by it because she felt like her labor and her emotional energy that was going into this aspiration of being a curator was being taken advantage of. And indeed, it kind of was. She was getting coffee for people and on false pretenses and whatnot.
Right.
So we had a very good conversation about we have to work, with people to get art done.
Yes.
We've kind of,
even if you're an individual artist, we're constantly reliant in one way or another on many other people, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even as far as if you're, a painter, unless you can harvest all the materials, make your own paintbrush, which I would doubt many people can do these days. Stretch your own canvas and do all these different things. We require a set of different people who are specialized in different areas of production to simply paint a picture of a sunset.
Yes.
But even more so when we're talking about like large productions, musical performances, art gallery installations. And it's unfortunate that so much of this whole world has been basically organized so that people who already own property, people who already own specialized equipment can just make money off of other people. So we had to sort of deal with this reality that even as people that were putting on this opera, we had the same issues at hand. It simply wouldn't exist if we would have done this in a park, for example.
Right.
Like we wouldn't be able to stay overnight there, which we were at this residency.
Yeah.
We, wouldn't have been able to have access to certain people. Like my collaborators were in New York and I live here in Chicago. So even sort of like logistically speaking, a lot of that was facilitated through this whole organization, which I'm not saying had malicious intent or anything like that, but wouldn't it be nice if this were more accessible to not just me, but to everybody, and that this could actually become, a foundational human experience for all to
So
enjoy.
it seems that there is an equity component in this too, right?
Yes.
And it seems the more that I hear you describe this, that the more important that equity component is to your thinking about this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that within this project, we were still largely in the realm of asking questions. There were a few spots where we were able to really dream something in an affirmative way and say, we ought to do things this way. I anticipate that if we're looking at the future of where art is going to go, there's already so many barriers that exist for, all sorts of different people.
Right.
And I think that in general, especially within the artistic community, we're starting to realize that some of the things that we have comfortably gotten accustomed to doing, they're not working. And we have to think of, we've had to contend with this history of the romantic genius, for example, which has been the underpinning of a lot of picking and choosing those who have been gifted to have success.
Right.
When actually it's far more complicated than that.
Yes.
And there are many, not even many, there are a horrendous amount of people who go their entire lives not thinking that they can be artists or musicians or dancers.
And have a lot to say
and
have no real means to express that, right?
Yeah, of course. They don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they don't have the space. And those are things that do indeed exist in the world. They're out there. But, opening doors and allowing people to more freely think about being an artist.
Well, have you given any thought to perhaps doing some iteration of this process here?
Yeah, I have indeed. I composed this opera in a very open way where realistically anybody could do it. It started from a very general 2-page piece of paper that had some different actions, some different things that I would like the performers to consider. There's a heavy emphasis on telling your own story, finding your own idiomatic artistic means to sort of express the collective interaction of the ensemble. It could happen anywhere.
I feel a project in the making, and now next year is the 20th anniversary of the musical offering.
That's right.
And we are considering a few very creative composition oriented things to present next year, right? So I think what that means is stay tuned, right? Yes. I think that's what that means. All right. Well, Jack, thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you, Rick.
Appreciate it very much, and thank you so much for watching.